Hey everyone, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I am your host, Marissa Tandon, and my guest today is a writer, director, and my built-in best friend, Alexandra Tandon. Please welcome my little sister to the podcast.
Hello. I don't know what to say.
People usually say thank you for having me, or
Thank
it's
you
such
for
a pleasure
having
to
me
be
in
here.
the home that we share together.
Anytime.
I was already here. And now I'm in a different location of the home that we share together.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited that you wanted to be on the podcast. There we go. Well, what are we talking about today? What is the piece of media that was so formative to you?
Today we are talking about the TV show Charmed, the 1998 version, not the 2010s whatever version. Or actually, I think it was in the 2020s. I don't know. That goes to show you which one we're talking about.
The CW reboot is what you're thinking about?
Not that one. I
Not
didn't watch
that one. The original Charmed.
Yes, the OG Charmed.
I love Charmed, but I think I've watched most of it out of order while you were watching Charmed.
That is probably true.
Feels like I've caught like sort of glimpses, and then every once in a while I'm like, oh, like I think the timeline for me is very off of what actually happens in Charmed, because it's usually like you're watching it, so I'll sit down and watch a couple episodes with you.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Well, for people listening who have never heard of or seen Charmed, what is your quick, under a minute, spoiler-free explanation of Charmed, the TV show?
Okay. Well, I guess Charmed is a TV show about three sisters who start in kind of an estranged way and find out after the death of their grandmother that they are in fact witches, and they gain their witch powers and they have to work together to fight a bunch of demons and stuff, and they become closer as sisters and as witches as time goes on.
I think that's a pretty good description of the
Thank
show.
you.
It was pretty concise.
Thank you.
I liked that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually, as we go through this, the thing that's funny about this is, even though all of this would have happened directly under my nose, some of these questions I don't know the answers to. When is the first time that you encountered Charmed?
It's kinda hard for me to actually remember, like, definitely the first time because I've rewatched the show so many times, but I think I was probably in, like, late middle school or early high school when I first encountered Charmed, and I know it was because it was back when we still had cable,
Mm.
and I would watch, Law& and Order SVU a lot, and it would come on right after. So they would have, like, long runs of Law& and Order and then, like, a couple of runs of Charmed
Oh, like it was like
episodes.
back when television did that.
Yeah, yeah. So then I used to watch that because it would be in the time of day where there's, like, nothing on TV,
Mm.
except for Law& and Order for whatever reason, and then, like, the Food Network, so I would, like, switch back and forth between Law& and Order, the Food Network, and the Science Channel, and, wide variety of things I was interested in, clearly. And so
contain
then
multitudes.
yeah, of course. Deep from an onion, so many layers, but, after Law& and Order would be off, Charmed would come on, and then I think I watched a couple of episodes out of order, or I caught, like, the end of an episode at some point, and then I was like, what is this about?" And then Netflix had already started streaming by then, and, it happened to be on Netflix, so then I just watched it all the way through. So but there are, I think, 8 seasons of Charmed, so it obviously took me some time,
To get through it, yeah.
yeah, so it was, like, in my middle and early high school years.
So you were watching a lot of Law& and Order SVU, which is
Yeah, I don't know why. Don't
I think
ask, 'cause I really don't know.
I honestly feel like everybody had that phase, though. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't know
It's
the core
just
cast of Law& and Order SVU.
It's just always on, I think is why, and, like, you go to a hotel, what can you always find on TV? Some version of Law& and Order, which is usually Law& and Order SVU or the Food Network, and it's like, there is only so much diners, drive-ins, and dives that I can watch until I need to watch something else, and I love Guy Fieri, but sometimes you need a little switch up.
I don't
And
know
then
about you, but I
also
actually do think I could watch Guy Fieri nonstop.
well, also sometimes Guy Fieri leaves, and then it's like the little I prefer the competition shows.
Mm.
So then they have the little, like, "I'm making this for my girlfriends who are about to come over," shows
Mm,
where it's just like, like the Barefoot Contessa, which
yeah.
like not including her because I could always watch the Barefoot Contessa. But the other ones that came after her, not they don't pull me in the same way. And then your choices are usually like Ridiculousness on MTV
Mhm.
because that plays for 10,000 years or Law and Order. So
Do you have something against Rob Dyrdek?
no, actually I watched a lot of Ridiculousness in my young years, but the fact is most of the episodes I've seen already. So
That's so fair. I do think a lot about, like, the fact that Law& and Order SVU is, like, a touch point culturally for everyone,
yeah.
and when you wanna talk about, like, strong female characters,
Yeah.
and also, the other thing that really, really I would like someone to make a Law& and Order investigation about? Detective Stabler's home life.
Oh,
Every
yeah, it's
episode,
a
they reveal
mess.
something new and a new child, and he just has so much going on. I
Yeah.
hope he's doing alright.
I don't think he is. He left the show and then came back, but I don't know what's going on now because I actually haven't watched Law& and Order SVU in a long time.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I will say something that you touched on that we have talked a little bit about on this show before is sort of like the changing landscape of how you find television shows.
Mm.
And so it's interesting because you're talking about a moment in time where like streaming was very young, but it
Mhm.
was old enough that you were able to see something on a TV show on TV, like on a rerun, and then go and find it.
Yeah. I think definitely the only streaming service that we had at that point was Netflix. I don't know. I think like Hulu was around, but like we personally didn't invest in Hulu at that time.
I think Hulu was actually free at that point. So
Mm.
Hulu started
I
out
don't remember ever using Hulu back then.
I remember because I had part of the reason we didn't get Hulu for a long time is because as a teenager, I was morally upset, against the way that they changed their business model because because Hulu originally was free TV with commercials,
Right.
and so you could just watch stuff that you missed on TV, you could watch it
Mhm.
on Hulu, which was great because you missed things all the time because you had a life, and
Right.
so you could just watch TV for free on the internet, and you just had to watch commercials the same way you had to watch TV on the television with commercials, and it was great.
Okay.
And then they were like, "Just kidding, now you have to pay me money," and I was like, "Look, that is not what this was. Hulu used to be the whole point was Hulu, it's free TV. It's not
Well,
free."
then that probably explains why I didn't use Hulu. If you got mad at it, I was just like, "Okay, whatever, support," and
Well,
then
at
I
the
only
time
watched Netflix.
at the time, I think Hulu was still free, but someone would have to fact check that for me.
Well, this was like between 2012 and 2014 is when I started watching Charmed. So
Gotcha.
obviously, I wasn't watching it when it was airing because it aired in '98 and I was born in '99. So
Yes, very fair.
yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's cool though because I think some of the other shows we've talked about, like on our episode where we talked about Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
Hmm.
Gabrielle talked about how he had to sort of watch everything out of order because there was no way to catch up.
Oh,
So you just had to like
watch whatever
watch
came
what came on
on.
and like
Yeah.
hope that you could figure it out or acquire
That's
old
how I used to watch Hannah
episodes.
Montana, honestly.
Exactly. Well, yeah, so I think it's interesting because it's like you apparently were able to watch enough out of context that you were interested to go back to the story. But
Yeah.
like Law& and Order SVU, for example, you can always watch it out of context.
Yeah.
But you found a show that you then were able to very simply go and find, which is not always the case.
Yeah. Well, I think actually what the one that sticks out to me that I remember seeing, like and I know it was the end of an episode that I had seen, and then they started playing something else, and I was like, "Hmm," and I didn't know what was going on. It was actually the episode where Phoebe tells her sisters that she killed Cole when she actually didn't.
Mm.
So I just remember watching that scene of all 3 of them, and they're, like, in the mausoleum, and there's this, like, piece of the like, concrete flooring that's, like, blown open and, like, smoking, and then she's like, "He killed" I can't remember what the name of the other person was that was there. There was, like, another demon there, and she's like, "He killed him," and then her sisters are like, you did what you had to do," and then they, like, end the
Oh, so
show.
you actually like caught a
So
cliffhanger moment.
yeah, and I think maybe that's what made me want to go and watch it because I was like, "What's going on?" Like, it was, and I think that was multiple seasons in by that point, so
Yeah. And that would have been like Charmed is like you said, it came out in '98, so
mhm.
it has the late 90s style of
Yeah, I think that also probably drew me in.
You're like, "What's going on here?"
It's like, everybody's so pretty and grainy for some reason, but I'm very interested to find out more.
Yeah, it's interesting because like, the way you're describing catching it is sort of the way I remember watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air,
Yeah.
where it's like you caught the episodes that were on and you were
Yeah.
able to watch it. But Charmed has a pretty, like a pretty steady storyline that you need to watch the whole thing to understand, right?
Yeah, I would say, like, if you picked up and I mean, it definitely depends on, like, what season you found yourself in. If you picked up an episode of it, you could eventually kind of find your way, especially in, like, the earlier seasons, like,
Mhm.
seasons 1 through 3. If you picked up an episode of Charm, you're like, "Okay, whatever, like, I don't really know what's going on," but you could probably figure it out. I think as it goes on past season 3 because, Prue gets replaced and everything like that, and the storylines get more entwined with, like, their personal lives and things that are going on as far as, like, who's coming after them,
Mhm.
it gets more difficult probably to understand without having watched previously.
Would you say that, like, the first 3 seasons have sort of like a monster of the week feel where you can jump in and, as long as you understand, like, 3 women are witches that are sisters and they're fighting a
Mhm.
bad thing, you can enjoy it?
There's definitely, like, a big bad through the
Mhm.
whole way through, but it's not always the, like, ever-present situation because basically, like, their big bad essentially for almost the entire show until the later seasons is what's called the Source, which is the source of all evil, who's
Mm,
basically just, like, the, king of all the demons and all that. Basically, the Source is their big bad, but he's not always coming after them, but, like, essentially, you can infer that every demon that comes after them is because the Source wants them dead.
I see.
So there is always a new monster or demon or whatever, um, and there's, like, the slightly smaller big bad, which is called the Triad, which is basically just another, like, worker for the Source. So they're constantly trying to, work up to getting him, but there's, like, a bunch of, like, minor before you get to the final
Yeah,
boss level type of deal
sure.
demons.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you said you started watching Charmed when you were in middle school?
Ish, yeah,
Ish,
I
yeah.
can't really remember. I was at, like, 12, 13, 14 time.
So, kind of what was going on in your life at the time when you found it?
Not much. I mean, I had to go to a new school. My elementary school stopped at 6th grade, which was 2012 for me. And then I went to middle school, 7th and 8th, and then, my high school was technically the same school, like, it was on the same campus, you didn't have to reapply or anything, but it was, separated as far as, like, this is the middle school and this is the high school, so it definitely still felt like a shift.
Mm.
So I think probably, like, it was, like, my middle school-ish years is when I started watching it, so general middle school crap is what was going on in my life? I don't really know.
So kinda like that shift from the elementary school that you had been with in the new friends era of, like,
Yeah.
kinda starting over is where you found this show.
Yeah, and I think, like, 7th grade was cool, 8th grade was, like, really garbage as far as just, like, what was going on. You know, I think how old would I have been in 8th grade? 13-ish?
Wow, yeah.
So yeah, not a good time for anybody at 13, and I think that is probably when I started watching Charmed, so I don't know, maybe there's some correlation there.
So was there something basically, like, Charmed was already done at that point,
Yeah,
so you didn't have to worry about, like, next week or
no.
anything like that or waiting for new answers or content. Did you go all the way through pretty fast?
I mean, as fast as you can when, like, you have homework to do.
Mm,
So, I think I mean, it probably I don't know. I actually really can't remember. It's hard because like, when you rewatch something so many times, like, I've probably rewatched Charmed, like, at least 10 times by now.
yeah.
So, it's hard to remember, like, how much time it actually took to watch something all the way through. But, like, I don't have the best attention span, so I probably at some point, like, switched over between things that I was watching. I don't think I could have watched Charmed every single day until I finished. It's a great show, but even I am not capable of
Yeah.
doing that, so, um, you know I had school and homework and extracurricular stuff and going out with friends and all of that. So it was probably like whatever I was watching in my downtime. But I also was watching Hannah Montana. Like there was other things that
You're
were
watching at the same
yeah,
time, yeah.
yeah. So it was what I watched when whatever I was like actively watching was not an option.
Would you say that it was, like, the only show you were watching that featured adults instead of like, the other stuff you're talking about is, like, Disney, like
Yeah. Probably. I mean, once ever I think when did Teen Wolf start? 2011?
I think yes, I think 2010 or 2011.
Yeah, so I was watching Teen Wolf, but that was I mean, it had adults, but was mostly based around high schoolers.
Yeah,
So I think as far as, like, anything that I was watching that was the adults were actually meant to be the leads of it, was probably just Charmed at the time, yeah.
interesting. Do you
Hmm.
feel like there was, like, a character or, like, a moment that really sucked you in and made you want to connect with that show or that particularly connected you to that show?
I think I really just liked the whole thing, honestly. When you know what it probably was? The magic of it all because, I think it was kind of the first thing other than, like, Wizards of Waverly Place
Mhm,
that I watched that was consistently, like, about magic, and it was allowed to be spooky, which I think is what the difference was, but
mhm.
they were not, like, automatically like, "You're evil, or you're working for the devil," or whatever. So I think it was one of those things where I was old enough to watch things that I wanted to watch and no one was gonna, like, come after me for it.
Mhm.
And it was one of the first, like, magic things that I watched and was really interested in, so I think that's probably part of what drew me in. And then also it was one of the first shows that I was watching at the time where there were 3 women who actually were the leads of something, and, like, there were men on the show, but they were never the most important people in the room, so I think that's probably also what drew me in, like, being a young girl and then also, like, going to an all-girls school at the time as well, like, I kind of was comfortable, like, being surrounded only by women, and,
Mm.
like, that was really nice, so I think watching it also with Charmed was, like, an extra little icing on the cake for me of, like, yeah, like, women can be powerful and do whatever. So,
Yeah, I think that's super interesting and a little sad that, like, the only show that far into your life that you can think of that was, like,
yeah.
centered around women as the core concept was from before you were born.
Yeah. I think I mean, as far as, like, women having, like, power
Mm,
because the thing with Charmed and, like, the 3 women, the Halliwell sisters in particular, is that they're supposed to be, like, the most powerful
yeah,
like, good magic that exists other than, like, the all-powerful good magic that's technically lit in charge of them or whatever, but we can get into that later. But, like, as far as the Halliwell sisters, they're supposed to have been the most powerful good witches that exist.
mhm.
So, you know, you can watch other things and I can't even really think of what I was watching at the time other than, like, whatever was on, like, Disney or Nickelodeon or whatever, and it's like, yeah, you had, like, leading women,
Mhm.
on those shows, but they never really were considered to have much agency because most of the things that I was watching, they were teenagers as well.
Right.
So there was always somebody who had a say in how they were doing things or living their life or whatever, and there was always more consequences for them doing what they wanted to do rather than what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like, if you think, just with, like, the magic theme or whatever, like, whenever I was watching Wizards of Waverly Place, the core concept of that show is that Alex wants to do magic. She's not supposed to for whatever reason, and she does it and always seems to screw it up, and then her big brother has to come in and fix it.
Mm.
And it's like, she's if you look at her as a character and fortunately or unfortunately, however you feel about that character, I think a lot of my personality kinda came from that character, at least, like, in my more formative years, but, when you look at that character, you should think that, like, she has a lot of power and a lot of ability to do whatever she wants to do, but there's, like, at any given point, like, 4 men yelling at her.
Mhm.
So, like, there's her older brother, there's her younger brother, there's her dad,
Mhm.
and then there was that, I think he was supposed to be endearing, but kind of creepy principal who, like, had a lot to do with
Oh,
her
yeah, yeah.
personally.
Mhm.
So, like, there's men from all sides just telling her she's wrong all the time, and she just wants to have fun and do magic and, like, be cool, and so I really liked her as a character and everything, but I think when I watched that show versus when I was watching Charmed, like, they were already adults, like, they could do whatever they wanted to do
Yeah.
technically, and of course, they had their own responsibilities and things that needed to be done, but I think also, like, the fact that it was 3 women and 3 sisters, like, that had their own support system within each other, and were able to do what they wanted to do as far as, like, career, love life, doing magic, like, all of that different stuff. I think that was the first time that I really watched women living their lives in a way that they wanted to,
Mm.
versus living their lives in a way that they wanted to while being told they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of the, like, teen shows that you're talking about too at the same time are, like, Wizards of Waverly Place, Teen Wolf, Hannah Montana. They're all teenagers with some sort of big secret,
Yeah.
basically, that they either are keeping from adults or being told by adults to keep secret.
Yeah.
So, like, you've got Hannah Montana, obviously, you have, like, her dual identity, and
Mhm.
the whole reason she has to keep her dual identity is because her dad says that she needs to.
Mhm.
And then obviously you even have in the Hannah Montana movie where he's essentially like, "You can't be Hannah."
Yeah.
Go
Which, like, let's unpack that for a second. Hannah Montana has a record deal. Like, we can't just say, Ma, you can't be Hannah no more." Like, it's a little crazy. Go
Um,
back to Tennessee for the summer if that's what you think that she needs, but you can't just say you can't be Hannah Montana anymore. Like, let's get into the legal contracts of the music company or whoever is representing Hannah Montana, and let's decide if she can still be Hannah Montana.
Right. I think it's a little wild. But it's a good point that you made though, because like in Teen Wolf, obviously it's not a female lead, but the women that are introduced in that show are all introduced as love interests,
True.
which I think is interesting. And then the sort of strongest female character you have in that show is Allison, arguably.
Mhm.
And she's also being sort of controlled by this, like, destiny of hunter parents and nonsense, and I think it's
Which are
interesting.
mostly men too, because they kill off her mom pretty fast, and then
Yeah.
her aunt's cuckoo.
Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So it's interesting that, like, the shows that were actually sort of at that time being marketed to people your age at that time all have that same core issue of to some degree, it's like an issue of just being a teenager and not being an adult yet,
Yeah.
but also the degree of, like, specifically being controlled by men in that same way,
Yeah.
and then finding a show that was made that was adults that were women, and they were not only in charge, but had more power than anyone else around them.
Yeah. Well, I think also just, like, as a teenager, like, someone is always yelling at you for something.
Mm.
And, like, that's pretty much a core concept of any show that revolves around teenagers as well, is, like, somebody's always yelling at them for some reason, and I'm like, "God damn, can we just have a break?" Like, I think with Charmed, in the later seasons, you do kinda get the same thing, but it's done in a different way
Mhm.
because they're adult women.
Mhm.
So, um,
You can't
there's
ground them.
yeah, there's a level of like, "Okay, whatever, I'm still gonna do what I want."
Right.
Um, where you don't really get that in other shows that I was watching at the time because they mostly revolved around people who were in their teen years, so
It's interesting. One of the things that you touched on is, like, the idea that they were sort of the height of good magic that was available in that world, like, they had the most power available. Does
Mhm.
their power derive from them being sisters specifically?
So, technically, no, like, it doesn't come from them being sisters, but the strength of their magic is tied to their sisterhood. So they're referred to as, the power of 3. So, obviously, 3 of them means that they need that 3 sisters magic to be strong together. And individually, sometimes they would go up against things and not be strong enough to take them down, and they would need all 3 of them, in order to take down particularly strong demons. Um, and there were times when they would get into a fight, like, there was one particular episode where, um, a demon, like, manipulated them to get into a fight as sisters, and they used their magic on each other, which is, like, a big no-no.
Mm.
And then it broke the power of 3, and then none of them were able to do magic. And then in season 3 or after season 3 when Prue dies and Phoebe and Piper are just left, then their power of 3 is gone. So they're not as strong as they were before when Prue is still alive, and they can't do certain things that they could do before when they had Prue because there's only 2 of them. So that's when Paige comes in and they find their, um, secret half-sister or whatever, and the power of 3 gets reunited. And so then they're able to be as strong as they were before, but they have powers regardless of their sisters, but they're not as strong without them.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. So they stand as individuals, but, like, when they are together, they are able to be something stronger.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did you feel like there was a particular sister that you liked the most?
Hard to say. I think in the first 3 seasons, it's, Piper, Phoebe, and Prue, and then after Prue dies, Paige comes in, and I liked I mean, at first, I didn't like Paige, obviously, and I remember watching the episode where Prue dies, and I actually didn't know that she was, like, dead for real and, like, wasn't coming back. Because people die all the time in magic shows, and then they come back. Prue had died several times in the show and come back to life. So obviously this aired, like, years like, many, many years ago. So I watched it, and I was like, "Okay, whatever, she's dead, like, whatever, cool, let's get to the next episode." And then they just introduced a whole new sister, and we're at her funeral, and I was like, "What the fuck? Prue's dead?" Like, I didn't believe it at first because I didn't realize all of the drama that had happened behind the scenes that caused, Shannon Doherty to leave the show.
Mm,
So, I was like, "Okay, I guess Prue is dead at this point." So then I didn't like Paige when she came in because I was in shock.
mm,
And then I grew to actually really like her. So I think as far as, like, the ones that I could identify with the most, I felt the most similar to Paige, but there are things that I liked about all of them. So, like, I guess I could try to rank them, but, like, I don't know if there was one that I really, really liked more than all of the rest. I think, like, Prue and Paige are probably at the top for me because of just, like, who they were as people and also, like, their magic that they were able to do.
mm. Oh, so did they do different types of magic?
Yeah, so all the sisters had different powers.
Okay.
So Prue could like, basically was telekinetic and, could move things,
Mhm,
but then their powers, like, grow as well along with the show.
mhm.
So then she also was able to do what's called astral projection, where she basically was able to, like, be in 2 places at once, but the only thing about that is she never really before she died, she never figured out how to control her physical body at the same time. So she would like, astral projection, she would, like, put another version of herself somewhere that
Mhm.
she was not, in order to, like, get to whatever obstacle, and then her physical body would just be, like, kinda
Oh, I
sleep-like.
see. Okay.
So that was kinda bunk, like, it would be cool if she could, control both at the same time, and then also, like, a lot of times her astral body didn't have powers, like, she couldn't figure out how to make her telekinesis work in the beginning. I think eventually she figured it out, I actually don't remember, but she tried. Um, so that was Prue's powers, and then she was also because she was the firstborn witch, she was, like, the strongest one, so she
Mm.
was, like, the super witch. Um, and then Piper could freeze time. And then in later seasons, she was also able to blow things up,
Oh.
which was cool, but it also was like she once she got that power, she didn't use her freezing power as much as she used to, which I didn't really like.
Mm.
And it also was, like, a little bit gimmicky
Okay.
sometimes.
Okay.
Not all the time. Not most of the time, but sometimes it was like, "Okay, whatever, she blew them up."
Mm.
Like, before they used to have, like, they would throw potions at people and they would say spells, and then now Piper can just blow up a demon and, like, the party's over, so it got
It's
a
a
little bit
cheat
annoying.
code,
Yeah, it was
sort
kind of a
of.
cheat.
Mhm.
So that's Piper, and then Phoebe could get premonitions of the future and the past, and she also could, like, levitate, but her powers were kind of trash, honestly. Like, they were useful, but I wouldn't want if my sisters could move things with their minds and blow things up and freeze time and I get visions, I would be pretty pissed off, which she was, honestly. So she didn't really have any active powers other than being able to levitate, which, like, it was a few feet in the air, let's be real. And then when Paige came, she was, like, Prue's replacement, so she also could move things,
Mhm.
but because she was their half-sister, she was half a witch, half a white lighter. Um,
Oh.
because white lighters are their, like, kind of guardian angel type things, and they have this, like, I guess you could call it, like, a teleportation power called orbing, disappear here, reappear there.
Mhm.
So she could do that as well as moving things, but the way that she could move things was different from Prue, who would, like, wave her hand and move something. Paige, like, orbed objects.
Okay.
So but she would have to call for them, which I thought was a little stressful because she would just be like, "Lamp!" and then, like, throw it at somebody, and I was like, "Okay, whatever," but it was like it's like shouting out reloading when you're reloading your
Mm.
gun in, like,
Yeah,
an
yeah.
action movie or whatever, like, we don't want them to know what we're
Right.
about to throw at them. So, like, Prue could just chuck shit at people, like, Paige had to call for something and then
And then
throw
throw
it.
it, yeah.
So, it made it, like, a little less fun, but then she could also go wherever she wanted because she could orb. So that was
Interesting.
cool.
Did you get particularly into, like, the mythology of everything? Like, you know these powers pretty specifically and, like, everything that they were able to do?
Well, I mean, if you watch the show, they explain it all to you, so
Well, yeah, but, like, was that something that you were, like, really invested in, or was it just something that, like, it was just a side part of the
I think it
show?
was just, like, a fact of the show.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool, but I didn't really, like, itch to know, like, where the powers came from and stuff. I mean, they give you the lore,
Mhm.
so, there's not really anything that's particularly, like, off screen that you would be wanting to know about and, like, in the fandoms about, at least in my opinion. I was
Mhm.
not around for the fandoms,
Right.
so
Yeah, that's something I'm curious about because, obviously the show had begun and ended before you started watching it.
mhm.
So, did you really, like, enjoy the show as a solo thing? Did you invest time on the internet? Did you
I never
talk to
got
other
onto the
people?
internet about it, until recently, I didn't.
Mhm.
And I was just always, watching the show, and I was like, "Cool beans," like, I'll get to the next episode, and that's fine. There wasn't really anything that I felt that they didn't put on the show that I, like, wanted to know. If anything, I, like, wanted to bitch about the things I didn't like,
Mm.
but I didn't really seek out anywhere to do that
Mhm.
because I was like, "Show's been over, like, why am I mad?" So yeah, I think recently, like this last year, I kinda stumbled upon the fandom by accident,
Mhm.
um, because I was, scrolling around on Pinterest as one does, and I was on Etsy or something, and I saw, um, downloadable pages for the Book of Shadows, which is their spell book, and I was like, "Oh, yeah," like, I had thought a bunch of times about, like, having my own because people make replicas, but they're really expensive,
Mhm.
as they should be. It's, like, a lot of work that goes into making one, but I was not about to drop that much coin on a, prop. More power to the people who want to do it, but it's just not me. So then I was like, "Oh, I could probably just make my own because there were downloadable pages." And then I decided to just make my own Book of Shadows because I just got a bug up my butt and decided to do it, and I'm a DIY queen. So I started doing that, and I was like, "Well, I might as well take videos of me doing it," and I posted them on TikTok, and I got, like, kinda popular, so then a lot of people were in my comments, and that was kind of the first time that I was able to actually, like, talk to people about liking that show. Because even up until then, I didn't actually see people on TikTok talking about it because it's, pretty old.
Yeah.
And then there at the same time that I was making my Book of Shadows, there happened to be another creator who was making a dollhouse replica of their house.
Mhm.
And so people in my comments had, like, told me about that, and then I connected with her, and we actually, like, talked a couple of times over TikTok, and we went live together and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. I, like, still see her content. I've kind of, like, haven't been doing Charmed content in a while, because I made 3 different props. I made the Book of Shadows, I made the Hollow, and then I made one of their vanquishing potions, like,
Mhm.
as a sculpture. But the hype had died down after I finished my Book of Shadows series, and those projects take, like, a lot of time and effort, and I really enjoyed doing them, but I also was like, "Nobody's watching," so I kinda stopped. But that was kind of the first time that I was talking to anybody online or elsewhere about the show.
Was it interesting to sort of, like, be a part of a fandom so far on? Like, it sounds like there's still quite a few people that are very invested in a show that came out before you were born.
Yeah, I think Probably because of the reboot as well, probably, like, had a bit of a resurgence of it, but the girl I was talking to is only a few years older than me as well, so,
Mhm.
like, you know, I don't know if she was watching it while it was airing, maybe, like, the later seasons she was. Yeah, but it seemed to be fair, I didn't go to everybody's profile and, like, see what was going
Sure,
on,
yeah.
but, it seemed to be, like, a pretty wide range of people who were, like, on the older side who would have actually watched it when it was airing that were enjoying my content, and
Mhm.
then people who were closer to my age who had also kind of, like, watched it on streaming or whatever. It seemed like a wide variety. I know there was, like, one comment I remember, that somebody was watching Charmed when they were, like, in labor with their child,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
was like, "Oh my god, okay." So there were some people who were, older who, like, actually watched it when it was airing. There were some people who were closer to my age who probably watched it on streaming and stuff. Um, so it seemed like a pretty wide variety, and then there were people who asked me if I was, like, into the new show as well, which I was like, "No," but,
Mhm.
I think there were people who were fans of the new version of Charmed as well.
Yeah, it's cool because I think, like, this is one of the things that streaming really did accomplish by coming into television. Like, we talk sometimes about the negatives of streaming, of, like, how it's taken away weekly viewing, how shows get canceled a lot faster, how, like, it's easy to miss shows that come out because there's just so much content. But some of the positives of streaming are some of these things where it's like you're able to find content that you literally never would have watched,
Yeah.
and that it sounds like such a wide range of people have been able to discover
Mhm.
because of the fact that it's accessible. So, like, shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer that, like, people wouldn't have seen,
Mhm.
like Charmed, like Teen
Yeah.
Wolf, people are starting to watch Teen Wolf for the first time right now because of the movie that came out, and,
Yeah.
uh, and so, like, it's interesting because I feel like one of the cool things about streaming that it's done for sort of like the TV watching culture is that it's allowed you to watch old stuff
Yeah.
that you might have liked more than what's out now.
Yeah, and I think well, also, like, it makes things a little more precious sometimes as well because you never
Mhm.
know if it's gonna get taken off. Like, I used to watch Charmed on Netflix, which is where I originally watched all of it, and then it got completely wiped out from Netflix all of a sudden, and I was like, "What the fuck am I supposed to do now?" Like, I was panicking, and then ended up getting the box set for Christmas, and then, of course, right after that, they put it on Peacock, but I'm like now I'm like, I have the DVDs, like,
Yeah.
nobody's taking this away from me.
Well, yeah, well, that's another thing is, like, that's how, I used to watch, like, Gilmore Girls. That was how we watched
Yeah,
Gilmore Girls growing up, like, I used
on
to
the
get the box
DVDs,
set.
and then we
Yeah.
one of our DVDs is missing from
Season
season
4.
4,
Yep.
so there's 4 episodes we don't have.
There's a gap.
Yep.
But yeah, I remember, like, the urgency of needing to
Mhm.
get the box set, every year. Like, that was while the show was on,
Yeah.
but that was something that we were watching and we would rewatch, and the only way you could rewatch it, like, rewatch what you wanted to rewatch was to have the DVD box set,
Mhm.
and that is an art form that we have lost.
Yep.
I love the DVD box set of of a television show, just so good. In your DVD box sets, do they have, like, extras, like, behind the scenes?
I'm not really, like, a behind the scenes girly. I mean, like, if there's drama, like, I wanna know, but and, like, there was drama, but, um, I think, to be honest, like I really wish I knew less about celebrities' personal lives because it makes it so much easier to start disliking somebody
Mm,
when the more you know about them, obviously, and, like, um, I think there's certain people who, like, music or TV or movies or books or whatever that, like, I really did enjoy, and then you learn more about that person, and it taints it a little bit, and there's been certain, like, musical artists in the last year or so that I've been like, "I need a break from you because I actually just know too much about you as a person,
mhm,
and I didn't like what I found out."
mm,
And then I, like, couldn't listen to that person's music for a while that I really enjoy and, like, had a significant impact on me, and I had to take a break from it because every time I listened to it, I was like, "Oh, but I remember this thing about you that I don't like that I shouldn't know or have access to." So, it's just, like, for me at least, I'd much rather just have the content and, like, enjoy the show and then not have to deal with the, like, you know, fictional characters are great, the people who play them sometimes aren't.
yeah, yeah,
And it's really easy, at least for me, to have a person ruin who they play on TV.
mhm,
So the less I know, the better, honestly, in those situations. So I don't really go hunting for a lot of, like, behind the scenes or like what was happening on set type of deal.
Thank you so much for joining me this week for You Are What You Love. This was the first half of our 2-part episode on Charmed with my guest and sister, Alexandra Tandon. Next week will be the second half of this episode where we talk about the storylines that were most important to Alexandra, how the Halliwell sisters taught her that being vulnerable is part of being a strong woman, and of course, a little bit about the romantic storylines in Charmed. Tune in next Wednesday for that episode. Between now and next Wednesday, if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me on social media at Marissa Kumari, anywhere you get your social media fix. You can also sign up for my newsletter by going to our website, tandemproductions.com, clicking on You Are What You Love, and signing up there. I send out an issue with every episode of this podcast. And we just started a Discord server, so if you want to connect with me, with other listeners, and talk about the types of things that we are talking about on this show, you can join that by clicking on the link in the episode description. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.